Hey guys, this is part three of our ranking for the live action Batman movies. We left off on number five in the last one. Now we are on the final four of my ranking. So, number four on my list is The Dark Knight Rises. I really do like this movie a lot, though my dad doesn't feel the same way. And you know what? I'm going to let him speak. So, Dad, you really don't like this movie, really? Because what I remember was we went and saw this in the theater three times, and every time we left the theater, you always told me how much you liked it. And each time we went to see it again, you told me that you kept wanting to go see it. You know, you were the one who initiated the idea. So, what is it that you don't like about this movie? Because I still don't understand really.
Um, ugh, Dark Knight Rises.
This is the one with Bane and Catwoman, and this is the final one with Christian Bale as Batman.
Yeah, I mean, I know it. The biggest problem I had with the movie,
Because this is number nine on your list, actually, which is shocking.
I just, I hated Bane. I hated the story. I hated broken down Batman. The whole thing. As a fan of Batman, I just struggled watching broken down Batman who gave up because he just gave up.
Like at the end of The Dark Knight, you mean?
Yeah, I struggled with that so much. And I get it because they tried to,
Protect Harvey Dent's whole crimes.
yeah, protect Harvey Dent, you know, kind of use the whole Batman battling with with his psyche and all of that. And I just struggled with it. It just and it was it that movie could have been 45 minutes shorter
Oh,
with
geez.
all the garbage that they drug out with the last 35, 40 minutes of that movie didn't need to be there.
The final
With
showdown, the climax.
No, the showdown was fine, but all the garbage in between where they were showing all the tractors, the trucks running up and down the city streets and all that kind of stuff. You could have cut all that stuff out and it would have had no impact on the movie.
Oh, because
You,
we didn't need to see that Gotham had been taken over by Bane. We already got the idea.
yeah, we could have just went 3 months later or a year later, whatever. That little thing where they go a few moments later. You could have done that, and this movie would have been palatable. But it was just too long, and it was, and
I know.
I did,
You and runtime. I get it.
and it was, and I didn't like how I didn't like beaten down Bruce Wayne. I couldn't watch it. All I kept doing is waiting for him to come back and be Batman again. Come back and be Batman again. And he was it was too long. The hole, when he was in the hole, he didn't
The
need to be in
underground
that.
prison. The underground prison.
Yeah, he didn't need to be in there for 40 minutes. He needed to be in there for 10. They could have went 3 months later, 2 months later, whatever. They didn't need this. They were trying to build it up like a Rocky movie.
Oh, like so, like to show him like regaining the confidence in.
Training, yeah, and recommitting to being Batman again.
Well, I think that made the moment that he became Batman even cooler, though. You know, seeing the buildup.
I guess. I couldn't do it. It was just too long. It was too long. I didn't really like Bane as a character because there was no that wasn't his character. I didn't feel like there was any development of the character.
With Bane.
Yeah, it was just like he escaped the hole. Okay, how do you escape the hole? Why do you escape the hole? What happened to him till he was in the position where he had to do that? Why does he have that oxygen thingy on his face? Why does he need that?
Well, I'll tell you what, Dad. I will respect a lot of your criticisms about this film. I tell you what, I'm going to tell you. So I really do like this movie a lot, obviously, because it's number four on my list. So
Yep.
let me just tell you why I really like this movie. All I want you to do is hear me out. Can you do that?
I'm in.
Okay, so here's why I like this movie. So overall, I think it works really well as a trilogy ender. And here's why. So if you look back at it, this movie ties up major storylines that were kind of left unfinished in Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. And that would be in Batman Begins, it's the whole story with the League of Shadows because although Batman defeats Ra's al Ghul at the end and he dies, okay, good, but the League was still technically out there, and without their leader, they might be disbanded, but we never really found that out. And also with the Dark Knight, you have the storyline with Harvey Dent at the end where Batman took the fall for his crimes and went into hiding, which, okay, yeah, I do like that idea for an ending, but it still needed to be resolved, in my opinion. And this movie resolves both those storylines very well. It brought back the League to have as the big, final showdown at the end and the big, threat throughout it because Bane had now taken over the League. And also, he reveals to everybody that Harvey Dent was, in fact, the bad guy the whole time, that Batman took the fall. And it wraps up those storylines very well. But also because I do like, I understand that you have issues with Batman's journey throughout this film, but the reason I like it is because it's another movie that takes a lot of inspiration from The Dark Knight Returns, the graphic novel and animated film where an older Batman came out of retirement. It took inspiration from that. And I do like that story because it shows, no matter how beaten down or how old he gets, he's still willing to be Batman to protect his city and to do what he needs to do. And it was definitely like the moments where he was in the prison. I guess maybe he could have been in there a little less than he was, but I do love how his whole journey of escaping that prison was such a great callback to a line from Batman Begins, where his dad tells him, why do we fall, Bruce? So we can learn to pick ourselves up. And we see him trying to escape the pit where he's climbing up, but he keeps falling because he doesn't have the confidence again. He needs to fall so that he can learn how to be Batman again and regain that confidence. And I think, regaining the will to be Batman is a great journey for him, especially for a final movie in your trilogy or franchise. So I really did enjoy that for this movie. And that's what made the moment that he became Batman at the end more satisfying, seeing him earn that position, that buildup. And that was something that I really liked. So that's one of the things I liked about Batman's journey in this movie and why I do like the storyline. I also do like, I know that you don't like Bane, but here's why I like Bane in this movie, because I get that the whole mask thing felt weird, how and all, but the reason I like Bane is because he's a lot more closer, like he's a lot closer to his comic book counterpart than Bane from 1997, because this Bane isn't just intimidating and strong and whatnot. He's also very intelligent. He's menacing. You could buy him as this mastermind, which is exactly what he was in this movie. And I thought that he was terrifying. And I don't know if I would agree that he has no development, because we find out earlier in the movie, well, later in the movie, actually, in the flashbacks, how he was actually in the prison with Ra's al Ghul's daughter, Talia, that he was the one who saved her from the pit, that she was the one who escaped. And I really enjoyed learning that about his character because it misdirects us. We thought he was the kid who escaped, but he was actually the one who saved her. So it shows you that Bane isn't just this cold, heartless monster. He actually does care about something. So that was something cool that I really liked seeing with his character. And so that's why I like Bane. I also actually really do like the plot twist at the end where we find out that Marion Cotilliard's character is actually Ra's al Ghul's daughter, Talia. I thought that was a good reveal because, and it kind of actually makes sense because if you bring back the League, even though Ra's is dead, I mean, it would feel kind of incomplete if you didn't also bring back or, bring in Talia, because she's also a big part of the League. And to have her in it was satisfying. And I actually didn't see that coming when we first saw the movie. I'd heard rumors, but I didn't believe them because you can never really trust rumors all that much. And I really liked the reveal that she was Talia. I didn't see it coming. And I liked the fact that she was actually the one pulling the strings. And it shows you that she might actually be as bad or worse than Bane. So that's what I really liked about that. And I also loved the idea that they made Gotham a sort of war zone, how Bane took it over and it just was turned into this sort of wasteland. That takes a lot of inspiration from some inspiration from the Batman graphic novel, Batman No Man's Land, which is a great comic book series. But yeah, that's one of the reasons, well, many of the reasons why I really like this movie. Do you get what I mean, or do you not agree with any of that?
Yeah, you're digging way deeper than me. I looked at it more to surface level, and you really dug in, and that's probably why. For me, I didn't this. You got sucked in by that, and I didn't. I looked at it more at a surface level and was just like, oh, this is just too much for me to want to deal with. Whereas you were immersed in it, and that's probably the biggest difference. between our opinions of this movie.
All right. I understand. Well, that's just how I look at it. That's why I still really like this movie and why it's my number four. But yeah, I think it's a great ending to the trilogy and for Christian Bale's tenure as Batman. But nevertheless, I do have my issues with it. I will agree that the pacing isn't that great at times. Sometimes, it's kind of a slog and it takes a while to move the story forward. And maybe we spend a little too much time with Bruce in the pit, though I do think it was nice that we spent a little bit of time instead of just immediately escaping or something. But yeah, that was a complaint. One of my biggest issues, and this is a problem that I have with a lot of the live action Batman films, is that there's not enough Batman. And that's an issue with Tim Burton's movies, but also Schumacher's films. And that's the thing. The movies tend to focus a lot more on the villains than Batman himself, which we'll get into later. But so yeah, that's another complaint. And also they had Catwoman in this movie as well, which I liked Anne Hathaway as Catwoman. I thought she was good. I don't think she was as good as Michelle Pfeiffer or Zoe Kravitz or anything, but I still thought she was fine. But I just didn't really like her interactions with Batman all that much because remember, like that's a big part of Batman's journey is his relationship with Catwoman, and their whole dynamic just didn't feel as believable to me. But other than that, those are my only big complaints. It's I still like the movie overall. I'm sorry that it's really low on your list again.
Yeah, just everybody's got the things that are I guess a hot button or thing, and I just didn't really. This one just didn't pull me in.
Okay, I understand. I'll tell you what, why don't we move on to the next one? Number three on my list. Number three is Batman Begins from 2005. And this is actually your number one on the list. So this really your favorite live action Batman movie?
Yes.
Really? Okay, well, you know what? I get why. This used to be my number two, actually, but yeah, it's a great movie. But you know what? I will ask you about this just before we really dive into it. So I was too young to understand this at the time, so you probably have a better idea. But I think what probably made this film such a treat for Batman fans when it first came out was the fact that, well, remember the last Batman movie that came out 8 years before it was Batman and Robin. So I'm sure that a lot of fans were wondering when this movie was coming out, is this movie really gonna be any good? And was that something that you were feeling when it was coming out?
I think people were thirsty for a Batman that was going to be truer to the comics, be less comedic,
And campy.
and what's that?
Campy?
Yeah, and wasn't going to be that. I mean, I think what was the storyline in this was great. There was just enough backstory. The story tied in, whether or not you wanted to do it, and and the tech aspect of it, that Wayne Enterprises was basically a military tech company,
Yep.
made everything believable for the gadgets for Batman. That
Yeah.
is the thing that really tied it all together. And the Morgan Freeman,
Right.
he looks exactly like the character in the cartoon.
Lucius Fox.
I mean, he looks almost exactly like Lucius in the cartoon and the comic book interpretations of Lucius.
Yep.
He's right there. He's right there. He looks the part, and basically it just tied it all together and put probably the best modern twist on it.
Like as a gritty approach to the character of Batman and the world.
Yeah, because how does Batman have all these gadgets? Well, because Wayne Enterprises is a military, arms company that
Right.
sells products to the military. So you can say all these prototype products that never made it into production in the military and locked in a vault at Wayne Enterprises that our hero gets to just pull out of like it's his toy box.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I see what you mean.
It
And
it made it the most believable adaptation of time and what and who Batman is, the backstory, him going, how did he learn how to fight? Because he went to Europe and he learned how to, you know, basically be a ninja. That was probably the best and most believable backstory for Batman as a character. The fact that he can fight, he can move and do everything exactly basically like a ninja.
right. Yeah, I get what you mean. And yeah, I love this movie a lot. I think that it does such a great job with portraying Batman's origin story, and I do love that it's an origin story. I do love, you know, Bruce Wayne's evolution into becoming Batman, how he goes and he trains with the League, how we saw him in his travels. And I think it also does a great job with sort of setting up the Batman mythology, like from the comics, because, we meet Gordon, we have Alfred, we have Lucius Fox. We also get a tease at the end for the Joker. We see Ra's al Ghul and the League of Shadows. We see Scarecrow. This movie sets up so much in such a great way.
Absolutely, and it did it effortlessly. It didn't feel like, I think the word you used a little while ago, the slog.
Right.
Usually, a lot of times, backstories for characters, especially in movies like this where the characters are so developed, they're it just drags and drags, and this story felt smooth and effortless.
Yeah, it did.
It was great, and it was and the story was, as as far as you can go for a superhero movie, it was somewhat believable.
Yeah, it was believable. And that's one of the great things about it, about I think the Nolan trilogy in general, is that I think maybe not all of it, but part of it is believable because of the fact that it's so grounded.
Yeah, there's no the funny thing with the Nolan stuff, there's no Superman flying around. There's no, you know what I mean? It's basically as if it was as if there were no superheroes. The superhero is Batman.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I get what you mean by that. And also another thing that I think is great about this movie is Christian Bale, which I mean, don't get me wrong, I think Christian Bale was great throughout the whole trilogy, but I think he's particularly great in this one.
He did a really great job of, they aged him well for the character,
Yes.
and he just he looked the part.
He did look the part. And well, that again, looks aren't
Even
everything.
though, no, I know, but he has to be believable as Batman and Bruce Wayne.
Yes, he does.
And he was both. He was both. He's not a big guy by any means, you know, but but because of all the tech, he didn't have to be. It was just he was this was really good.
It is really good. And
This movie was just, it just made it everything was, the vehicles, the all the tech, the Bat Cave, how the Bat Cave came to be, was all simple and effortlessly part of the backstory of the movie. And I mean, when you walked out of that movie, it was like, wow, that was just great.
right. Yep.
The buildup was fantastic
It was.
to the end. I mean, it was just great.
It is great. Yeah, it's a fantastic movie. And now I think another thing that this movie does really well. So for me personally, I think that this movie, along with the Batman from 2022 and Batman v Superman, I think the things that this movie and those movies captures really well is Batman's ability to inflict fear on criminals. Because in this movie and the other movies I just said, they do a great job portraying Batman as a frightening character among the criminal world.
Yes, because he fights in the shadows.
Yes.
He doesn't take people straight on because there's only one of them.
Right. Yeah, that's something that I think the film does really well. And I think that's because of what the theme of the movie is. I think the theme of this movie is definitely fear, if you look at it. And that has to do with Scarecrow and what Ra's al Ghul's plan was to destroy Gotham and everything. And I think fear definitely fits well as a theme for this kind of movie. And it's something that works well. Other than that, I do love the Batmobile in the Dark Knight trilogy. I think that the Tumbler is awesome. It's definitely what you would expect from a modern Batmobile, and it's definitely one of my favorites. Is it one of yours?
Yeah, it's right there. It's a tank. It was fun. It was cool when it was, riding up the, roofs of those buildings and stuff like that. It was pretty cool. That chase scene was probably one of the shining moments of the movie.
Oh yeah, definitely. Even though, there was no way that the cop cars could catch him though.
Well, yeah, there's that, but
But
you
whatever.
got to add a little drama.
Yeah, you do. But other than that, I think another thing this movie does really well would have to be the villains, because you have Ra's al Ghul, you have Scarecrow in the League of Shadows. But I think that what's so great is Liam Neeson plays Ra's al Ghul so well, and Cillian Murphy plays Scarecrow so well. They just really nailed their villains so great, and I could really just buy their performances so much. They were just such magic on screen, right?
They were, but the other thing that was so good about it is that they didn't go crazy with the characters because this was still an origin story for Batman.
And it was still also a contemporary take and grounded version as well.
Yeah, but you couldn't have too many bad guys, which was good.
Right.
And they didn't go crazy in the back on him because you couldn't.
Right.
Because then again, you would have had a 3-hour movie
Yeah, I get it.
runtime.
Well, I will agree with that. And yeah, but I do love this movie regardless. And but I do have just three issues with this film that kind of keep it from being my number one. And here's what they are. So, and this is a topic that we've discussed many times, prior to this episode. So for me personally, I think the second half of this movie is kind of a little rushed. Well, here's why I say that.
And yeah, let's dig in a little bit here.
So the reason I say that it's rushed is because for the first half was pretty much him during his travels when he was training. The second half is when he's back in Gotham, when he becomes Batman and figures out how to be Bruce Wayne. So that's fine, but I feel like he figured out how to be both Batman and Bruce Wayne a little too quickly, because we saw him being both personas, and hey, that's fun. I love seeing both personas as they play out, but I feel like he figured out how to do it a little too quickly. He didn't develop it too much. He just immediately figured out how to do it, and it never felt like much of a challenge to be both personas, because that's, I think, a big part of Batman's whole journey. How his life is a lot. He has to be both Batman and Bruce Wayne. He has to manage both lives, and in this, he's supposed to be at the beginning of his career, and I think it was a little too easy for him to live both personas. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Um, I felt like it was they kind of had to pick their poison on where they needed to kind of be quick and where they needed to let it drag a little bit. And I feel like they just had to throw that in. I hate to say it like that, but throw that in, get it out of the way so that you could move on to the more, the more important things. I think they looked at it as a minor detail and then just said, "Hey, look, we've got to throw it in there. Let's just make Bruce go buy a hotel."
Yep.
And that'll show him that he spends money. Let's throw a couple of socialites on his arm in a Lambo and make it happen.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I get what you mean. It's just still an issue that I have, but I can kind of see where you're coming from. Now, my other two issues. So the other one has to do with the character of Rachel, played by Katie Holmes in this movie and Maggie Gyllenhaal in the second one. So I gotta be honest, Rachel as a character, I'm just not really a fan of. I just don't think she really does that much, and I don't really like her. And this relates back to what I was saying earlier about Batman movies and their struggle with love interests. I just don't really buy her relationship with Bruce Wayne all that much, and it just it's a big part of Batman Begins that I just found incredibly boring. Does that make any sense?
And see, I didn't see her as a love interest. I saw her as a childhood friend. I just, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I guess they tried to throw it in there, but I think they were trying to ground him. Is that the right way to say it? Probably.
probably.
I
Yep.
think they were probably trying to ground him as a character and and humanize him a little bit.
Yes.
And
Okay. Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah. I guess that's one way of looking at it. It's just if they had taken that whole romance thing out of the movie, I would have been a lot more better with it, probably with her character, because again, I don't think she does too much in this movie and The Dark Knight, but it's nothing against the actors. I think they were fine, but it's just not something I enjoy in this movie or The Dark Knight. But other than that, my other big complaint has to do with the character of Ra's al Ghul in this movie, because as great as Liam Neeson is in this movie as Ra's al Ghul, the reveal before the climax of the film that he is Ra's al Ghul is kind of weak.
You knew he was Ra's al Ghul the whole time.
Yeah, that's what I mean, because you see, if we were watching this movie together for the first time, I probably would have paused it halfway through their training, and I probably would have looked at you and said, he's probably Ra's al Ghul, right?
Yeah, it was like, yeah, okay, whatever.
And at the end, before the climax, before at Bruce's party when he shows up, and we find out that he really is Ra's al Ghul, it doesn't really feel like much of a reveal. It just feels more like, oh, okay, yeah. I mean, we kind of knew already.
Exactly. That's exactly how it felt. It was like, yeah, okay. Tell me something I don't know.
So yeah, that's another issue I have. Again, he's still a great villain, and I loved his performance, but it's just another issue that I have. It's not as like shocking as the Talia al Ghul twist at the end of Dark Knight Rises, but hey,
No,
whatever. That's just
it doesn't take away from the movie though.
no, it doesn't take away. It's just something that I've always kind of noticed about it, but whatever. All right, so next, let's move on to the next movie on my list. So the next one is The Dark Knight. This is my second favorite Batman movie, and this is actually your number three. So we're not too far off on this one. So
No.
The Dark Knight, I absolutely love this movie. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's fantastic. I just love it so much. There's so much to like about this movie. I know that it's a Batman film that you've never really regarded as your favorite, and but you still do like it overall, right?
I think the action in this is probably the best of the Nolan trilogy.
Yes, I will agree with
Just
that.
just the straight up action aspect of the movie is phenomenal. The all of the bat gadgets and all of the stuff, it's just, and it's probably got the best pace
Yes, it probably does.
of them because everything is just happening. You're
Yeah,
you're totally engrossed and you're staring at the screen, you're looking at every corner because you don't want to miss something. It was just so engrossing.
it was, and that's the thing about the movie. It starts and it just doesn't stop. It's so invigorating, and that's what's so great about it. It just makes you feel like you're into it from beginning to end, and that's what's so great about it. And so, yeah, here's another thing that's great about the movie. So it's a sequel that doesn't feel like a cash grab, and that's something that I think a lot of sequels feel like. They just feel like cash grabs. They didn't feel like something that people really cared about making. They just made it for the sole purpose of making money. That's not the case with this movie. This feels like something that Chris Nolan and the team and the actors, this feels like something that they really cared about making, that they cared about making good.
You could have made this movie before Batman Begins, and it still would have been good.
It
Like you didn't
absolutely
need
would.
you didn't need the origin story.
Right. Yeah.
It was just so good from the second you started watching it.
It is. It's such a great film. And again, yeah, like you said, you don't need Batman Begins. You could even take out Dark Knight Rises, maybe, and this could still just work as a standalone Batman movie because that's how great it is. And I also think I do think that the plot of this film is really good because, like I said, how fear was the theme of Batman Begins and how I think pain was probably the theme of Dark Knight Rises. I think the theme of this movie is probably anarchy or chaos, and that mainly relates to the fact that Joker is the villain and what Joker represents, because it really just feels like you're in this big, majestic, action-packed thriller chaos ride, and that's what's so great about it because it keeps you invested. And I do like the idea that it's sort of a so if you look back at the Nolan trilogy, each one is a Batman movie and a superhero film, but they each also feel like a shared genre film as well. Like the first one, Batman Begins, feels more like an adventure story in a way because of how you see Bruce on his travels and then him becoming Batman, whereas Dark Knight Rises is more like a war film because of how Bane takes over the city. And this feels like a straightforward crime thriller or mob epic, because of how Joker is hired by the mob to take out Batman, but then he slowly just assumes control over the criminal underworld. It just does that so well, and I love how it just feels that way.
It was really good. The characters were all great, and this was also the de-evolution of Harvey.
Yes, that's right. And that's another thing that's great about the movie is I like the partnership between Batman, Gordon, and Harvey Dent. It's such a cool dynamic and like trio of characters. And I do like Harvey's, de-evolution into becoming Two-Face. And I think, a lot of people might have had, some people might have had an issue with the fact that his whole arc as Two-Face was told in just one movie. Maybe they thought it could have been saved for the next one, but I do like Harvey's character and I like his whole arc into becoming Two-Face and whatnot. And again, Aaron Eckhart plays him very well, and he plays Two-Face how you would expect Two-Face to be.
Totally correct. And it was the man wrestling with right and wrong.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that's the that it's something that's relatable for probably everybody that watched the movie.
Yes.
And I think that's why I think the character is like grossly underappreciated in the movie because Joker was done so well.
Yeah, and that's probably that might be the best thing about this movie actually. Heath Ledger as Joker, what a phenomenal performance. That's probably one of the best performances we've ever had on screen. He just played that character so beautifully. He just became Joker so well. I think that's probably the best version of Joker that we've ever had in live action or just in general.
Yeah, probably that's true. And I think, and again, that's why it makes Eckhart's Two-Face role
Underlooked.
underappreciated just because of how good Ledger did so good he stole the whole movie.
Yeah, he did.
And Eckhart was great in this movie. Bale was great in this movie. This, like, acting wise, like, as if you want to go from like the whole cast, this is probably one of the best showings by the complete cast.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that. The acting's fantastic, especially Heath Ledger, like we said, and he was great. Another thing that I think this movie does really well is I think that this movie actually has the perfect balance of both Batman and Bruce Wayne because we spend a lot of time with Batman and a lot of time with Bruce Wayne. Maybe a little bit more with Bruce Wayne, but we got to see both personas really balanced and just fleshed out more. Well, not fleshed out, but just, got enough screen time together. And yeah, I just think that this movie has probably the perfect balance of Batman and Bruce Wayne that we've ever seen.
No, I would think that I agree with that 100%. Very true.
And yeah, I just love this movie so much. It's definitely one of my favorites. I don't have a lot of cons with this movie. I think I have just one in particular. So this is just something that I've always kind of felt with the whole Nolan trilogy, like with their Batman in general. So as great as Christian Bale is as Batman and Bruce Wayne, one big issue I've always kind of had with his character was his sort of dedication as Batman. And here's what I mean by that. So in the first one, he said that he wanted to become Batman to inspire people to fight back, which, okay, fine. Okay, good. That makes sense. And in the second one, we see him trying to find a way to stop being Batman. So he thinks Harvey Dent might be a good successor. And I mean, okay, he's succeeding in making people, inspiring people to stand up against criminals in Gotham. But him wanting to retire from Batman was something that I just wasn't really a fan of because the idea is that he is supposed to be Batman. He wants to, in this movie he wants to retire and just be Bruce Wayne where Batman is who he really is. Bruce Wayne is supposed to be the mask and that's sort of a problem that I've had with a lot of live action versions of Batman. Bruce Wayne felt like who he really was where Batman felt more like the mask. And his dedication and motivation of being Batman just didn't feel as strong in this movie particular. It's just something that I've always noticed. I don't know if you have the same problem.
Yeah, because that was the deal. It was I think that it was I feel like it was like a struggle with mortality.
Right.
And it was like, look, and because Alfred kept saying, hey, look, you can do more as Bruce Wayne with your money and influence rather than going out there and destroying your body and potentially dying. I think that was the struggle through the whole movie is how can I be more effective? Can I be more effective being Bruce Wayne and spending money and doing foundation? Or do I go out there and just beat the shit out of everybody as Batman?
Right. Yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah, it's just a little kind of a problem that I've always had with this version of Batman in general. I still think it's great and I love Bale's performance and whatnot. He is my favorite Batman. But yeah, other than that, I still love this movie either way. All right, now let's move on to the final one. So this is now my favorite Batman movie of all time. Number one, that is The Batman from 2022. And this is actually number six on your list. So this will be fun. All right, so The Batman. I just this what a Batman movie. What a movie in general. I thought this movie was just fantastic. This is honestly the live action Batman movie that I've been wanting to see, I think, my whole life. And I know that it's a movie that you kind of, as your number six, you kind of had your issues with, and there were things that you did like. So, all in all, would you say, did you like this movie?
I did. I did like this movie. But it was funny because the ways that I like it, um, portrayal of the Penguin, love it. My favorite of any of the movies.
Oh, Colin Farrell's Penguin in this movie?
Yeah, because he's a slimy little guy.
Yep.
He's not a fish.
Okay, I get it.
He was what he was supposed to be. He was basically a crime boss.
Right. Yep.
You know, he runs the Penguin Club
The Iceberg Lounge.
or the Iceberg Lounge, excuse me. Yeah. But he's just his character in this movie was fantastic.
And I'm surprised you say that because when we saw this in the theater, when we left, you said that you didn't like his performance all that much.
It was funny. I think it took time to like just like appreciate it a little bit. And then once you go and you compare it against the previous versions, you're like, hmm,
Yep.
all right, I like it.
Yeah.
Um in this movie, the portrayal of Gotham City was good.
Yeah. I think this
I
probably
love that.
this and Tim Burton's movies probably have the best Gotham City in the live action films that we've ever had, probably.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly the gritty, grungy nastiness.
It felt like a character, which was cool.
Yeah, it really did. Gotham City was definitely a character of its own in this.
Yes, it
You
was.
know, they did a great job with all the rain and it was fantastic as far as that goes.
And I liked how it mainly took place at night as well. That really added a lot to it.
Well, because that's when Batman is out.
Yes, of course. Well, that's what I mean. But I'll get into that later. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
what else do you like about this movie, though?
Um, development wise, I liked it. I mean, I never you know, as you move through the movie, it was yeah, I think it was true to the cartoons from a character standpoint. You know, you've got Falcone or Falcone, whichever way you want to call him in any of the movies or the various versions of the cartoons. You had you had the Penguin, you had Falcone, you had your bad guys, you had you had Catwoman, you had
Riddler.
Riddler, which I didn't care for.
I know you're not really a
This
fan of Riddler as a character, but
in this, I just thought it was horrible. But the the makeup of everything, it was really good. I don't know that I love the little bat cave under the downtown subway thing. I don't know if that was ever in any of the graphic novels or something like that. Maybe that's
it,
where it was
it, it,
from.
it was, especially during the earlier years.
Which and I liked it. It made it believable and stuff like that. And it was and as far as like a an origins kind of story, it was pretty good, you know, from that kind of standpoint. I think that's what I liked about it the most. And all the, you know, yeah, I guess that's probably it.
Okay, that's fine. Well, tell you what, I'll tell you why I love this movie, why it's my favorite. Okay, so first off, the story. The story for this movie was just fantastic. Not only because of the fact that it was a mystery story, but also I just liked the plot for this movie in general. I thought the narrative was so great because, you know, well, first off, we finally got to see Batman be a detective, which have we really seen a lot of that in most of the other live action Batman films?
The answer is no.
Yeah, and he's just maybe he did feel kind of like a detective in some of those movies, or at least smarter than everyone, but he never felt like much of a detective. And we actually got to see him solve things and find clues and be at crime scenes and connect pieces together. And that was so much fun because that's such a big part of his character. And it felt like, watching a graphic novel on the screen just play out, and it just felt so rewarding to see with his character.
And that's what he is tagged at. He is tagged as the world's greatest detective.
Yeah, he is. And actually, I do like how he's not a I think he's a good detective in this movie, but he's not exactly a great one yet because, well, it's only year two. He shouldn't be the best detective he can
No,
be.
he's still learning.
Yeah, it makes sense that he didn't, because remember, he and Gordon, as they were solving the case together, they didn't put together, like put every piece together. They made mistakes, which made perfect sense. I mean, it's only year two Batman. And that was something that was really cool. And I loved seeing that mystery side. And I think Riddler was a great choice for the villain of this movie because, it's a mystery story. I mean, Riddler is such a great choice for that, considering, what he does. And I know you didn't like this version of the Riddler and you're not a fan of Riddler as a character in general, but the reason I liked it was because it still felt true to the character, how he was still a egomaniac who just loves toying with people, especially Batman. And I loved how they made him a serial killer. It was a lot like it was inspired by Batman, The Long Halloween, my favorite Batman graphic novel of all time. It did great portrayal of that. And obviously it's a different character in that, but you know what I mean. But yeah, I love the plot of this movie. I loved how Batman was a detective. I also love how, just like The Dark Knight, it's another sort of mob story as well, because that relates well with the type of world that Batman is in, especially at the beginning of his career, because again, it's only year two. I mean, it makes sense that the mob is what he's mainly dealing with because all his villains haven't emerged yet. So that was great to see. And I also think that this movie handles multiple villains very, very well because if you look at it, we had Riddler, Falcone, and Penguin. We had Catwoman, who's really more of an anti-hero in this or a protagonist, but they were all connected by the same mystery. They had their own agendas overall, but they were all connected by the mystery and the plot, and that was done really, really well. And to me, it didn't feel like it was overstuffing anything. It felt like they were just part of the universe. So I thought that was a great thing that Matt Reeves, the director of the film, did really well. So that was something that I love. And this is one thing that I know we have agreed on before. And this is probably one of the other best things about the movie. The movie actually focuses on Batman. It's not about the villains for a change. It's actually about him. It has him on screen for pretty much most of the movie, where all the other films usually spend a lot of time with other characters. In this movie, it's actually about him. And also, not only that, but for once, we got more Batman than Bruce Wayne for a change.
From that standpoint, this probably was the best adaptation of a movie, of a Batman movie, for that portion of kind of, development, or whatever you want to call it.
Yes. And aside from that, I also really love Batman's characterization in this movie and Robert Pattinson's acting, which we'll get into in a minute. But yeah, I think that Batman, the way he's portrayed in this movie, is so great. It really feels like the Batman from most of the comics, the Batman that we grew up with in the comics and whatnot. It just felt like that really great. And also, in terms of the acting, I thought Pattinson did a really great job. And here's why. I think that he did two things better than most other Batman actors, including Bale and Affleck and Keaton. And here's what I thought he did better. So, number one would have to be his dedication as Batman. And this relates to my complaint about The Dark Knight from earlier. So, Robert Pattinson's Batman, and I think a lot of this comes from his performance. This Batman felt like the most dedicated Batman that we've seen on the big screen. Because if you look back, like at Michael Keaton's Batman, in the first one, when Vicky Vale asks him, or maybe not ask him, but says she doesn't know what to make all this, he says, "You know what? I don't know what to make of it sometimes either. It's just something I have to do." She asks him why, because there's no one else to do it. Which,
Well,
okay.
nobody else can do it because I'm a billionaire and I can afford it.
Well, yeah. I mean, there is that, and I get it, but usually there's more to it with Batman's character than just that. There's also Val Kilmer's Batman, who, after he fell in love with Chase Meridian, he decided, you know what, it's time to give up on Batman. And then Christian Bale's Batman kept looking for a way to stop being Batman. And for me personally, just Pattinson did such a great job in the role because he portrayed Batman's dedication and motivation as a character so great. And that made me just respect his performance so well because this felt like a Batman who never gives up, who always tries to get the job done. So I think performance wise, he did really well with that.
Because he's young, because he's young and not jaded yet.
Right. Which again, that's kind of how Affleck's Batman is, kind of jaded, but because he's 20 years into his career. But hey, that makes sense.
Correct.
But yeah, Pattinson portrayed that very well. And another thing that I thought he did well, like better than most of the other actors, I think that he did a great job making this Batman feel like his Batman to me felt the most sympathetic. And here's why I say that. So Batman as a character, as a hero, is actually a very tragic and sympathetic character, because of what happened to him and what he went through to become Batman. This Batman, like, just feels so tortured, and a lot of that comes from Robert's acting because he makes the character feel so tormented and disconnected from the world. And because of that, he's the Batman who I feel the most sympathetic for. I don't feel very sympathetic for Keaton's Batman all that much, or Kilmer's, or Clooney's. I kind of feel sympathetic for Bale's and Affleck's Batman, but not as much as I feel for Robert's Batman because he just captures that so well. So that's one of the two things that I thought he did so well in his performance.
Mm-hmm.
Which I know you didn't exactly love Robert's performance as Batman, but would you say it was still good?
Batman portion was okay. The Bruce Wayne portion, he just looked like he was young John Wick walking around.
Well, and that's the thing. That's another thing that I think people had an issue with this movie. So a lot of people were disappointed that we didn't see the Playboy Bruce Wayne, but I'm honestly really glad that we didn't see that because, a lot of people thought he didn't have the charisma that Bruce Wayne is supposed to have, but people keep forgetting this is only year two Batman. And I don't think that, going around showing up at charities and acting like a playboy and buying all this expensive stuff. I don't think all of that would have really worked in this movie.
No, I agree because of his age. He's probably supposed to be sub 30 years old.
Yeah, like late 20s or 30. Yeah, it just all of that, just all the stuff that he usually does as Bruce Wayne, it wouldn't have worked in the type of story that this was with everything that was going on. Like, look back at Christian Bale's Batman from Batman Begins. Imagine if that type of Bruce Wayne is what we saw in this movie.
No, you couldn't do it.
Nope. It just
You couldn't do it because it's let's just say for the sake of argument, you're dealing with 28-year-old Batman.
Yep.
He's not ready.
He's not ready at all, which I'm glad is what this new franchise with Pattinson is doing. It's really helping him grow into the Batman and Bruce Wayne that we're supposed to see, which we'll see in the future. But other than that, aside from Pattinson's acting, which I thought was great, I also loved his dynamic with Gordon and Catwoman. And here's why. So I don't know if Jeffrey Wright is my favorite Gordon. I still think Gary Oldman is, but I honestly liked this dynamic with Gordon the best because not only did it feel like Batman and Gordon from the comics and the old animated show from the 90s, but it
Mhm.
also felt like they were these two detectives in a classic noir film trying to solve a mystery together, and that was just so unique about their relationship.
No, I agree with that. Their relationship was probably the best part of the movie.
Yeah, because it is definitely one of them. Because again, it's like two detectives, not just Batman and Gordon, but these two cops trying to solve something together, and it just felt like an old classic. It kind of felt like Seven, the movie with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman in that way, which was done really well. So I loved their dynamic. I also really love Batman's dynamic with Catwoman in this movie, and this is not a movie where I think it struggled with a love interest or whatever. I think Selena felt like a lot more than that. She wasn't just a love interest; she had her own arc, her own journey throughout the film, and it connected well with what Batman was doing. And honestly, I think Batman's chemistry with Catwoman in this movie was the closest to the comics that we've ever seen on the big screen.
No, it probably was, but the check back to Gordon on that is the other thing that you're kind of missing that is probably underappreciated is the fact that you're watching Gordon's inner struggle of being a cop and working with a vigilante.
Yeah, and plus he's the only good cop because most of the other
Yeah,
are all corrupted. He's the only good
yeah.
cop.
So he's the only good cop and he's working with a vigilante, which goes against everything that he believes as being a good cop.
Exactly.
I think that's then an arch or an arc in the story that is very, very underlooked at and underappreciated. It's here's this he's struggling with the fact that he has to have this guy help him because nobody else can.
Right.
And it's a struggle.
It is a struggle, but it's also just one of the most exciting things and compelling things about the movie.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Totally
So
agree.
that's great. I love his dynamic. Yeah, again, I love his dynamic with Gordon. I love his dynamic with Catwoman, and because she actually had a role. And yeah, so much was done well in this movie. And yeah, right now it definitely is. But I still have Yeah, I do have some cons with this movie, and here are the two of them. So, one, and this is probably my lowest one, and this is probably going to sound ridiculous to you, but I think my one con is I don't really love the title of this movie, The Batman. I mean, it's not a bad title. It's just I feel like they could have done a little bit more with it. Like maybe call it Fear the Batman because he's, looked at as vengeance, or maybe the Batman Vengeance. It's just not, it wasn't as big of a title. But other than that, I think my other big complaint would have to be probably Alfred. Now, don't get me wrong, I thought Andy Serkis was good as Alfred in this movie, but I felt that Alfred was kind of underused in this film a little bit.
Okay.
Well, here's why, because when you look back at what Alfred is, so in the comics and the movies, Alfred is usually like Batman's voice to reason in a way. And I think that the best Alfred we've ever had was Michael Caine in the Dark Knight trilogy. He was always so great at being Batman's voice to reason and his, type sort of mentor and father figure. And you could kind of see that with the Tim Burton Batman films and even the Schumacher films. But in this movie, it's not so much, again, I liked Alfred's character in this. I liked how the sort of tragic thing about this Alfred, and they talk about this in the movie, was how he had never really been a father figure to Bruce. He was just a teacher or a mentor or a guardian. And I did like that dynamic, but at the same time, I did feel he was a little underused in the film. But I don't know if you felt the same way. It's just something that I noticed.
I think he's going to end up being the person who trains Bruce the most in this series of movies, because I think there is a set of comics or whatever where Alfred is like a retired like Secret Service undercover
Yes, yep, he
kind
is.
of operative that is, and I think that's what you're going to see with the storyline with that, is that he's gonna be the person who actually trained Bruce, and not the League of Shadows and not some secret ninja organization somewhere else. I
Right.
think that's where you're going to probably find that in this adaptation, is that it's going to be Alfred is the one that trains Bruce how to
Bruce Wayne.
no, he's going to teach him how to be Bruce Wayne, but he's also going to teach him how to fight.
Right. Well, and I think that that was kind of implied in the movie that he had maybe taught him how to fight when he was younger. I think this Bruce probably still had his travels and whatnot, maybe not with a league or with anybody else, but just went travel
Mm-hmm.
the world. But yeah, it's clear that he was definitely a mentor to Bruce and also a guardian. But yeah, I still liked their dynamic. I just thought he was a little underused. He didn't feel like Bruce's sort of voice to reason until the later in the movie when he goes to visit him in the hospital and he tells him, about their relationship and whatnot. I did like that, but otherwise, I still love the movie either way. And yeah, I think I'm probably going to keep it at number one for a long time. We'll see what happens. But yeah, anything else you want to talk about before we end?
No, I think that kind of covers it. It was really good. The I think the focus of the rest of this will probably be more focused on the other characters. I think they worked really hard to try to focus this movie through the eyes of Batman.
Which was great.
Yeah, which is probably the only movie that's ever done that.
Yeah. Well, that and Batman Begins probably. That's probably the only other Batman movie that focused on him the most, probably. But
Yep.
it's mainly because it was an origin story, like we said before.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I guess that's pretty much the end of the ranking. Thanks for doing this, Dad. I had fun doing this with you.
Yeah, me too. It's good time.
Yeah, it was a good time. Well, thanks for listening, guys. We have more to come, and don't forget to like and subscribe again, and we will see you later. Bye.